Welcome to It's Been How Long? The podcast about Cherry Hill High School East students from the late 1970s and early 80s. This is Kara Siegel. I'd like to welcome in Carson Shaffer to the It's Been How Long podcast studio today. Hey, Carson.
Hey, Kara, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the podcast today. Thank you for answering my call when I was short of episodes. I really appreciate it.
It's really an honor to do this. I've seen a lot of them and seen everybody, and so I figured I should sign up.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So I'll start out like I always do. We're almost 44 years post graduation. Where are you and what keeps you busy?
I turned into this old guy. I don't know what happened. I used to be young. Um,
We're still young.
yeah, I ended up moving to Florida where I love it. I live on a farm,
Oh, nice.
and so we have horses. In fact, I just finished brushing all the hay off of my shirt from feeding the horses. I owned an IT company in Orlando for almost 25 years,
And
and
you're living, your farm is located where?
we live in this little town called Christmas, Florida. It's about
Christmas.
halfway between Orlando and that their space center. And
Okay. All right.
as I say, my street is rocket scientist redneck, and my fear is that I have a rocket scientist on either side of me, so that makes me. And but now I had an IT company, sold it to take care of my mother full time, and then sort of semi-retired, doing a lot of consulting. And now my wife tells me I have to get one of those things. I can't really bring myself to say the word. Job, job, job. And we want to build a new house on our land. And so I don't want to touch any of our savings. So I'm going to go ahead and get a job and figure I can pay off a house in 3 or 4 years and
Nice.
go back to being retired because I love this. I've been retired like 5 years.
Oh, yeah. Excellent. Excellent. So your job would be as what?
Right now, I'm actually talking to one of the county sheriff's offices for
Oh,
their director of IT or their
okay.
director of cybersecurity operations.
Okay. Okay, very good. So when you're not working, what do you enjoy? What kind of fun activities do you do?
I got stuff. I've I still play an instrument. I still play guitar. Started like violin when we were in third grade at A. Russell Knight, and then started playing sax in ninth grade because it was really uncool to play the violin, and I wanted to go to Switzerland.
Okay.
And at some point, I picked up guitar. And the funny part is, I never learned to read music for guitar because it's not a serious instrument, right? So here we are, 44 years later. Yeah, I worked on a professional race team for 11 years,
Race,
and
racing what?
like we didn't. It's not NASCAR. It's
Okay, it's
sport car
F1, not
racing.
F1. It's not okay.
We're the people who pronounce it Le Mans. And so we won like the 24 hours of Daytona, the 12 hours of Sebring. And so it's a pretty large racing series. And it's televised. We were on TV, and I did that part-time for 11 years. And
And
that
what exactly did you do?
team slave. I did whatever you needed to do. If you needed the RV set up, I did that. You needed help in the pits doing tire changes, I did that. Um, I did some work with an oscilloscope when we had some electronic problems because they needed somebody who's an expert with an oscilloscope, and I used it my whole life. And so I got to do everything, and I got to be a part of it and to see how something really large, their problems had one or two more zeros than my problems, and to watch how pretty famous people dealt with adversity, and it was pretty bad adversity sometimes. And so it was a great life experience. My son did it with me for all 11 years. So he grew up watching all this. So that was cool. Then I live on a farm. We have horses and pigs. And I was the president of the Orange County 4-H because
Oh,
we
okay.
had we had robotics and horses and cattle, and I knew both sides. Big boater, used to live on a boat. And so, yeah, it's as my wife once said when she took off to have the kids, it's amazing I ever had time to work.
It's a lot to do there.
Yeah.
So what did you enjoy doing back in high school? You mentioned playing in the band.
Yeah. I've always loved music. I've never been the best one. Everybody watching this will remember that, yeah, Carson was okay, but like, you got people like Reggie who are just, I'm not worthy.
Yeah,
He's
shout
phenomenal.
out to Heaven's Edge.
Yeah. Oh, there. What what a great story. I'm glad things are going well for him. But
Yeah,
I love playing music. I took 4 years of electronic shop with Ernie Mayo, and I'm still working off of what I learned in that class. And my parents had a boat in Maryland, so every Friday, as long as we didn't have a football game, I got in the car and we drove down to the boat, and I spent the weekend at our boat. And I had my group of friends there, and then we came home late Sunday night. So I was never around on the weekends in Cherry Hill. So that was kind of why I never really got into a group like that much, except for the band.
yeah, yeah. So did you have a job back in high school?
I worked at Richmond's Ice Cream along with
Okay.
everybody else.
Yeah,
Would always try to con the waitresses into making another mistake.
yeah.
And I worked at Rossica's Apothecary for
Okay.
Jim Green, Route 70,
Okay.
and wrecked his car my second day on the job, and he didn't fire me. So I was a delivery boy for him for about 3 years.
Okay. All right. Uh, so you, what did you do after graduation from East?
Well, I went to Ohio University where my father got his master's and my mother got her bachelor's, and they were both World War II vets and met in front of the movie theater on Valentine's Day, fell in love, and they sent their little boy to the place that gave them so much happiness. And I smoked a lot of pot. I played in a band. I was a Sigma Chi, and that whole class thing, electrical engineering, you don't really need to go to the classes, right? So they unashamedly kicked me out, said, you come back in a year. My dad kicked me out. I lived behind a buddy of mine's house for 2 weeks in a tent, which was interesting. Got a job at a place called Plasma Therm, worked there for 4 months and said, you do this until you retire? Oh my gosh. So then a friend of mine, Ted Nettleton, joined the Air Force and seemed like a good thing to do. So I joined the Air Force, and it gave my life the direction it sorely needed.
All right. Um, so yeah, so tell us a little bit more about your experience in the Air Force.
I did really well. You take a test when you join called the ASVAB. And apparently I did exceedingly well on the ASVAB. It was the only test I've ever taken I enjoyed. If this lever turns this way, which way does this gear go? And I just love stuff like that. So they said, you can do anything you want. What do you want to do? And I said, my dad says these computer things are going to be important in the future. So what do you got for computers? Oh, we got lots of computers. Okay, well, you got computers on planes. Oh, yeah. What's the biggest computers on planes? Oh, C5 Galaxies. They have rooms. Okay, I'll do that. So I became an autopilot, instrument, and computer guy on C5s, volunteered for every single overseas assignment I could get. And they sent me 80 miles from my front door in Barkley Farms at Dover Air Force Base.
So
And
yeah.
yeah, it was a year-long school. I finished up and I came home to visit. And long story short, everyone was still sitting on the same bar stool they were when I left. And I realized that, wow, I don't want to, this isn't what I want to be. And so I loved the Air Force, got to fly all over the world, spent a long time in Panama, Nicaragua, and Honduras in the 80s. My kids watch Narcos and go, Dad, man, do you know about that? I'm like, no, really, tell me about what military is doing there. And got married and ended up getting out. I should have stayed in as a flight engineer, but I got out to go to UCF in Orlando, Florida with my wife.
So
And
how long were you in the service?
4 years.
All right. Well, thank you for your service.
Oh, you're very welcome. Like I say it was the Air Force. We slept more before 9 a.m. than the Army did all day. And I came to Florida, went to UCF. Um, Halfway through my senior year, my wife decided that she was tired of me going to school all day, every day, and left. And I had to get one of those horrible things, a job. And so I went to work, and I went back to work as an engineer. And after a year, I said, I got to finish my degree. And I went back, and they said, oh, we've changed the catalog. And it was a big change. And
Oh,
I looked at it and said, this is nuts. I've had all these, I had thermodynamics, I had fluid dynamics. I don't need to take thermofluids and, all that stuff. And so I ended up never graduated. But I've always worked as an engineer. And as one of my bosses said, you're getting paid like a senior principal engineer, aren't you? And I was like, well, yeah. And he goes, good. I want you here working as one. And so ended up doing that, played in a band still all the way through everything. Got laid off and was fortunate or unfortunate, I don't know which one, to play on the road with a band for about a year and a half. And so I got to do everything I wanted. I possibly embraced the lifestyle a little bit too much. Had a massive heart attack at 40.
oh my.
The Widowmaker for our medical people, 100% focal stenosis of my LAD requiring shock twice.
Wow.
And
And this is when you
50%.
were on the road as a,
No, that was when I did a lot of damage to my heart. And then we had children. And so I went to work full time. Actually, I worked about 70 hours a week. I have ADD. So I played in a band. I worked 60, 70 hours a week, and I built my own house by myself out in the middle of the woods. And, none of that. And I smoked. Oh, geez. I smoked like 2.5, 3 packs a day
ooh,
and drank and all the bad stuff and didn't ever sleep. And did all the chickens came home to roost. And fortunately, I lived to return to the coop.
wow. That's amazing. Good for you.
So,
So that was at age 40.
yeah.
And did you change how you pursued things after that?
Yeah. Everything came to a radical stop. Um, Everything started exercising, eating well, stopped drinking, stopped doing everything, quit smoking. Diet was harder than smoking. I was amazed by that, how difficult diet was. And so I've been pretty much a good boy ever since. Had to learn how to play sober, which was a real experience.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, my kids were 2 and 4
Wow.
at the time. And when I came home from the hospital, I told my daughter, I said, well, we didn't want to tell you how sick I was. And she looked at me and said, Daddy, I know how sick you were. And I was like, oh, and I didn't want to leave them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm still here. They told me, you're always sure you're going to die the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And it really worked out well. I turned down jobs with travel because my dad traveled all the time, like a lot of our fathers did.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how long I had. So I wanted to spend as much time as I could with my kids. So that's why I started my own business, and I could do it. And I took them to school every day, and I pick them up from school, take them to my office and make them work every day. So we spent lots of time together, and I don't regret it at all. I have such a great relationship with my kids now.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Um, was there a teacher or a class at East that influenced you beyond your high school days?
Well, band, obviously, because, I did marching band and concert band and jazz band. And so Mr. Mayo, Mr. McGill, Mr. Bear, I could still hear him. I still tell my friends, he would tell us crescendos. You guys got a crescendo. And he go, don't you listen to Chicago? And of course, they're one of my favorite bands, and I've seen them like 15 times. So I was telling them, like, this is what Mr. Bear talked about. And as far as career, Ernie Mayo and 4 years of electronics shop, I'm still working off of what I learned in Mr. Mayo's class. That was beyond valuable to my entire life.
That's awesome. That's great. Um, did you have a high school sweetheart?
Yeah, she went to Maple Shade High School, Marie Murray,
Yeah.
long ago. And we broke up when I graduated and went away to college.
So how did you meet your current sweetheart?
Well, she was a nurse working part time in the pet store, newly divorced, as was I. And so I was doing the newly divorced thing, drowning my sorrows, riding on a dirt road to the bar from my house on my Harley. So there's no DUI chance. And I would stop and buy food from her. And about the second or third time, it was kind of, hey, you want to get a drink? And she said, yeah, I helped her clean up the store. And we've been together ever since. And that was 1987.
Wow.
So long time.
Yeah, that's great. And you have a couple of kids, you said?
Yeah, we have two kids, one girl who's 29 and a boy who's 27.
All
And
right.
both kids work for Fish and Wildlife,
Oh,
oddly enough. Well, they grew up. I used to be a dive instructor. My parents moved to the Florida Keys when I got kicked out of college. And my dad said, "Oh, I'll just take that money and buy a house in the Keys." And so they moved. And so I had been a dive instructor down there. And boy, I love being 61. I lost my train of thought.
so you were a dive instructor down in the Keys, you say, with your
Yeah,
folks?
but it was something with my wife.
Yeah. Yeah. Your
And
kids are in fishing
oh,
game.
yeah, there we go. So both kids now work for Fish and Game and became avid scuba divers. We live
Nice.
near the beach. They grew up in the woods in 4-H with all the animals. So now they both work for Fish and Wildlife, trying to save the world.
Yeah, that's
I,
great. That's wonderful. You still have friends from East you're in touch with?
yeah, Rob Thurston and I uh, touch base quite often. Chuck Skinner, or I should say Shimmer, on
Yeah.
Facebook and I were good friends. We always stayed in touch, but he recently passed, which was a real shock for everybody. And when I first moved out and got enough money to get an apartment, Bob Euland was my first roommate. So we were always really close. I joined the Air Force, he joined the Navy.
Oh wow.
But Bob has also passed. I've just been
Hmm.
amazed how many of my friends are no longer with us.
Hmm. Yeah. Anybody you were tight with you lost touch with?
Um, Well, all the friends, all your neighborhood friends growing up, thanks to Facebook, I still know where they all are.
Okay.
But, I live 2 houses away from Gary Snagerhoff.
Oh yeah.
And George Carpenter and I talk every once in a while. He was 2 houses the other direction. And so, yeah, Facebook has really done a great job of reuniting all of us. Well, we wouldn't be doing this without Facebook.
That's true. That's true. So do you have a standout memory from high school? Could be good, could be bad, could be with a friend, inside school, outside school that just sticks with you?
I really had a good time when we all went to Switzerland with the marching band. That was a great time. I was in ninth grade. I didn't know anything about high school, and it was kind of my introduction to high school and the social dynamics thereof. And I'm back to wearing glasses again. But growing up, I had braces and I got minus 8.5 lenses and always did. So my glasses were really thick and I had braces and I was really kind of awkward. Carrying a violin case really helped a lot. And so, about halfway through high school, I got rid of my glasses and my braces, and that helped turn me into a more normal kid. Whereas my children were amazed to hear you didn't get punched as much in the hallway.
Oh gosh.
But yeah, the marching band trip to Switzerland, marching in more Miss America pageants in, Atlantic City, and blowing things up in electronic shop.
That's awesome. So, anything you wish classmates knew about you back then or now?
I really wanted to be cool. That was like my thing. And I wasn't at all. I think
None of us really were, I don't think.
no, my daughter wanted to be a cheerleader and she's like, Daddy, what did you do in seventh grade? And I was like, I did a special projects presentation on Star Trek. And the horrified look on her face. And yeah, like everybody, I just wanted to fit in. And really, most of my memories of high school are the band room.
Have you been
And
back in that band room or the school at all since you graduated?
no, we, I had surgery. I got cancer of my thyroid, and they yanked it
Mm,
out all as well. And my wife
very
said,
good.
"Where do you want to have your 60th birthday dinner before your surgery?" And I said, "The Crab Claw in St. Michael's, Maryland." So while we were up there, I drove her through Cherry Hill, and we went to East, and I didn't go in because I believe it was on the weekend, so I figured the doors would be locked. But yeah, I hadn't been back to Cherry Hill since 1983,
Mm.
probably. And I don't know. I always found it kind of boring. It was staid and everything was just so. And I didn't like everything to be just so. I wanted excitement. Where I live now, I have a pond in my backyard that every year or so we get an alligator in it.
Ooh,
And
that's exciting.
yeah. And, I know how to trap it and we get it out. But I always said I didn't want to live in Cherry Hill. I want to live somewhere I have alligators in my back pond. And I worked on the race team in the pits with the cars, and I just like to do taught diving.
Yeah,
I like to do exciting stuff.
that's great. So we're back in 1980. You're looking out 40 years. Is this where you saw yourself?
I had no clue. I did what my parents told me to do because I didn't know anything else. Looking back on it, I'm sure, like a lot of us, my best skill, honestly, is writing.
Mhm.
I write really well, exceptionally well, because I went to East and got that education. But to me, being a writer meant that you wrote novels. You wrote novels of fiction. I didn't know that you could go to the Space Center and write all about everything that happens there and write books on the astronauts without having to be an astronaut. I thought that writers wrote, or you wrote a textbook. I didn't understand. I didn't really have a good idea of what people really did. I knew the job titles, but I didn't really understand some of the other stuff. So because of that, the only thing that ever looked interesting was electrical engineering because of Ernie Mayo's class.
Hey, that worked out for you. So did you have a dream job?
Yeah. I would say the best job I ever had was I was the uh, veteran consultant for a nonprofit called the Catalyst Refuge. And we taught disabled combat veterans how to achieve inner peace through interactions with lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my.
Oh, wow.
Inside the first cage, right up against the second cage. And, it's just, learning to be single minded, learning to calm down your inner voice. And what was cool was you walk in, we had a Black Panther, and you walk in the cage with a Black Panther, and everybody's kind of jacked up. The Panther senses that and it's pacing. It's got the same energy level you do. And we talked to the vets and they would look and they calm down. And as they calm down, the animal calms down until they'd finally mellow out. And the animal would come over and lay down right next to them in the cage and they could pet it through the fence. And they could put their hand up and the animal would rub their hand with the side of his face. Now it's really doing a scent rub, but we didn't say that. But they learned calm. and learned how to quiet that inner voice. Because for a lot of those guys and girls, they have a movie that does not stop, and it's a bad movie. I worked for over a decade at the local VA teaching the veterans how to speak again who were in the residential treatment center for alcohol, narcotics, PTSD, anger, and mental health. And we had some messed up people. I mean, they weren't ready quite, to go out in the society yet. And I came home one day and told my wife, we had a woman who was a triage doctor, and she was, I believe, in Kandahar province. And all she did all day long was decide who lived and who died.
Mm.
And she said she worked basically almost 2 years. She got 3 days off, I think. And that's all she did. And she was a raging alcoholic. And
Mm.
I came home and told my wife, I want to buy her a gallon of Jack Daniels and say, here, shut the movie off, drink this. And Cindy said, no, we can help her. And I said, you'll never get the movie out. And she said, well, what you're saying will kill her. And I said, good, it'll shut the movie off.
Mm.
She'll finally be free of it. And so I worked with a lot of those folks, and, we lost a lot of them.
Mm.
Back the time I got told, you don't want to know how many of your people have ended up taking a quick way out. And so that said something deep inside me that I like to help people. I do a lot of consulting now with computer companies. And I'm trying to help them.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot. So your background to help these vets, was it just because you're a vet, or did you get special training for that?
No, but they got that old saying, some gave all gave some.
Mm.
And I got involved with a couple of things that were 10 years of nightmares kind of stuff. And
Mm.
being on the road with a band, I knew about alcohol and narcotics.
Yeah.
And so that was my group. And I'll tell you one story. The happy story was, we had a guy that came there and they said, oh yeah, this is the new guy. He doesn't talk. And I said, I don't care. And so we get in there and we had a table topics thing. And I said, tell us about a beautiful girl you knew growing up. And he goes, and then sits back down. And so afterwards I went up to him and I said, I could see you wanted to say something. And he goes, yeah, they probably told you I don't talk. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, it's not because I don't want to talk. He said, I knew a lot of people growing up, but I never knew anyone that I thought was beautiful.
Hmm.
And I said, that is so much deeper than anything I have ever thought, man. Next time, just say that. And so little by little, he came out of his shell, until the end, he talked for a minute. And we were in a closed room. It's nobody but veterans. And I really pointed that out. It's just us. There's no civilians in here, so you can talk. And so I told the doctor who ran the program, I was like, hey, this guy talked for a minute. And he goes, what? And I said, yeah, he talked for a minute. He goes, thank you so much. And I said, well, I thought you'd want to know. And he said, no, thank you. And I said, oh, dude, I wasn't the one who did it. He's the guy who talked. And he said, no, thank you. You're the one who made an environment where he felt safe enough to talk.
Yeah.
And that was the one and only time in 10 years that I went out and sat in my car and cried.
Well,
Because the bad stories, we're all in the military. We all know what goes on.
mm-hmm.
That's what that one got me. So I
Yeah.
had moments like that. So it really made it worthwhile.
Well, that's great, Carson. That's
They
great.
shut the program down because of COVID and never restarted.
Uh, so best piece of advice you would go back and give your 18-year-old self, or maybe you gave your 18-year-old kids?
2 weeks ago, I had a stack of reference letters this tall to become a flight engineer, and I didn't do it. And I gave them to my son, who can be reticent, and said, I said, at work, you have a folder called personal, don't you? And he said, yeah. I said, put these in here. And every time you have some big, audacious dream, and you think, oh, I'm going to take the safe way out. I want you to pull these out and look at all these and think, my dad did that. And when he was 61 years old, he still said, it's really the only massive regret I have in my whole life that I didn't do that.
Mm.
So that would be the advice was don't get married, become a flight engineer, enjoy the rest of your life.
Okay. All right. So we've reached our fast and furious finish. It's usually neither fast nor furious. Did you have a favorite TV show or a favorite movie or a favorite book from back in our high school days?
Eddie Rickenbacker's autobiography was the book. Star Trek had to be the show. Although I like Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and Baba Black Sheep, all the military, all the Navy stuff. Oh.
Oh,
And it was a book, movie, and probably Star Wars. I saw it, I don't know how many times in the theater.
yeah. Did you have a favorite musical group? Do you have a favorite genre or artist back in high school?
I loved Springsteen. And then my family moved to the Florida Keys and I found Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah. Yeah. May you rest in peace.
Yeah.
Uh, favorite place that you hung out with friends or, you and your friends would go eat? Were you a diner
Oh,
guy?
Big John's.
All
I have
right.
spent 44 years trying to find something passably similar
Yeah.
to Avail.
Yeah. All righty. So here we go. Did you like your high school photo and quote? The quote being best memory, my friends and experiences at East in my senior year.
That could have been from Chat GPT. Write a generic memory about high school. Um, my wife has her high school graduation photo and mine up on the wall. And all I can say is, yeah, I would have asked you out in high school.
All right. What language did you take at East and have you found it useful?
Spanish. And yes, because I live in Florida, I was the one of the project engineers when we installed the e-pass system at all the toll plazas. And my passable Spanish came in handy because that was definitely the majority of people there.
Well, that's great. That's great. I think you're the first person who's found it useful. All
And
right.
Panama with the Air
Yeah.
Force.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Lastly, anything you want to tell someone or everyone from our class, kind of your parting shot?
I love the education that I got. You guys made so much of it. I feel like I didn't make that much of it, but my mom always said I had a different drummer and I followed the sound of that drummer. So I'm glad to see that everybody was so successful. And I guess in my way, I found success according to my definition.
Absolutely. You sure did. You sure did. Well, Carson, I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast today. And if I find myself down in Florida, I'll give you a
Cruise
shout.
terminal. If you leave out of Port Canaveral, give me a call. We'll grab a meal.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And if you find yourself up in Chapel Hill, give me a shout.
I sure will.
All right, Carson. Thank you again. Have a good
Thanks,
afternoon.
Garrett. Take care now.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining me on It's Been How Long? The podcast about Cherry Hill High School East students from the late 1970s and the early 80s. A shout out to my cousin Brad Corbett, whose podcast We Weren't Friends in High School inspired me to do this podcast and whose advice and encouragement have been so helpful. Thanks also to my husband, Randy Coughdale, who read all the fine print on the podcast hosting website so I wouldn't have to. And thanks to Jeff Lyons, content consultant and guinea pig, and to Deborah Smead, also content consultant. And thank you to all our classmates who are listening in. See you next week.